Hi, folks. This is Rick Doc Walker, the DOC.
This is John Kime, and you're listening to the Mess Hall with Rally Captain and Tailgate Ted.
And our guest of the hour, AJ Perez, just joined us. So I want to welcome in AJ Perez from Front Office Sports. AJ is a senior reporter for FOS. He's actually been doing this for more than a decade with USA Today, Fox Sports, CBS Sports. The guy has been all over everything Commanders. AJ, thank you for taking the time to join Rally and I in the Mess Hall.
No problem. It's been a long day. Besides the Commanders, I do also cover a lot of legal stuff, and you got to get Flores and Michael Irvin popping up today. So,
oh yeah, I've been following your timeline on Front Office Sports and just seeing everything you do. And we just focus on this team. I can't imagine everything that's kind of going through just your mind and all of your articles that you've got going on. But from our standpoint, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do and getting the truth out there in regards to this. And having been a longtime DC resident, Washington Redskins football team, Commanders fan, most teams would be talking about the combine right now and what their team is doing. But here in the DMV, it's a little bit different. We're more so concerned about the sale of this franchise. Is there truly a light at the end of the tunnel? And last week, during our show, actually, it came out that Jeff Bezos hired a firm to look into what a potential purchase of the Commanders look like.
Yeah.
And until then, I was thinking and telling our listeners that, you know, Snyder, it's been constantly said, don't know if he's going to sell to Bezos. Don't know if it's going to happen. But when that story broke, there was a little bit of a light.
And that happened right after Eric Bieniemy press conference. It was like within a couple hours.
It did.
That's so much. That feels like a month ago at this point. It was what, 6 days ago? It's
6 days.
It's
crazy.
6 days. It's been a wild 6 days.
It has been. And then another story came out, and there have been so many conflicting reports, just depending on who you follow or what you're clicking on. That's why I really appreciate how you summarize everything on the site. For those of our listeners, make sure you go to Twitter, follow by AJ Perez. Like I said, he's got everything you need to know about the sale of this team, plus more. But a conflicting report came out that Snyder was then making sure that Bezos could not bid on the team. Then you came out with the story on Monday talking about how that's not exactly the case. So from our listeners' perspective, could you help us wrap our heads around this kind of days of our lives saga as it comes to will Bezos not be, and just everything from that side?
It's kind of hard as a reporter to kind of put in what everything you hear, and we've known for so long, pretty much even before this team went up for sale in November, that Bezos had interest in NFL ownership. Obviously, we saw him up in the booth with Roger Goodell and one of the Thursday night football games this year. So the NFL owners want him. I'm not saying every owner wants them, but like the power brokers, the Jerry Jones, the Robert Krafts want Jeff Bezos as part of the NFL. And, this is not, and, my reporting has been kind of it's been close to when it comes to Bezos that everybody else has had, as far as, I never use the term barred. He's very reluctant, and because of the Washington Post, for sure. But, there's what's happening behind the scenes, which has been happening probably more the last couple of days, is that people are kind of lobbying for Bezos, and the people being, I can't say exactly NFL front office for sure, but I know the other, some owners, I don't know how many and which ones exactly, but some owners are actually trying to kind of play the role of basically, a power, again, kind of a broker in a deal between Bezos and Snyder. It's the most straightforward path. It's the quickest path to sale. Bezos has so much money, more money than anybody else. Probably was only the third richest person in the entire world. But also that, he has some, ties to DC. I know the Washington Post is holding them back a little bit. But it's also, he's also, he's going to be able to spend the money for a new stadium and be able to improve the facilities. And, it's the most straightforward path. And I'm not saying it's the only path. I think Harris is also in there. And that's why the top three I said yesterday, which I had been hearing for 2 days before I reported it, was that it was Harris, Bezos, or it's going to be Dan Snyder keeping the team. And that would be I think that would be the worst option for the NFL. I know a lot of fans around here aren't very keen on Mr. Snyder. So I think and we've seen why over the last couple of days of reporting by other outlets.
Yeah, I remember seeing your post and number 3 being Dan Snyder, and I was actually surprised at that. But then Sportico came out with an article, I want to say yesterday, talking about how the NFL might actually want Dan to keep the team because of the, I guess, legal battles that they can see themselves being in with Dan or going against Dan down the road. And the Washington Post came out with an article that the team has since said is false, saying that Snyder is looking for indemnification for anything down the road. And I think it was Stan Kroenke actually asked for the same thing when it came to the.
No, he signed it. He signed the document. He signed the document before the team, basically when the team was allowed to, basically before the decision to allow him to move to LA. They made him sign a document saying anything that comes out of it, I'll handle it, and he didn't. So this is why the indemnification thing was met with, like, I wouldn't say laughter, but it's like, oh, come on. I mean, we already had a guy who Kroenke was more resources than Dan Snyder, who has already owned 2, now 3. The NFL was the 3rd team. He already owned an AHL team and the NBA team. So yeah, so you have that, and then you're going to have Dan Snyder come in. I think more likely is going to be, and we get to it later, is going to be maybe some debt relief. The NFL is basically the co-signer in all these loans. They're not the bank, but they do back the loans that Snyder took out to buy out the co-owners. And I could see them coming down with, maybe cutting off a piece of that, nearly $1 billion, around $1 billion of debt. I could see that, but identification for a lot of the things that he has been, we've seen Congress, we saw what Beth Wilkinson had, a lot of things point back to Snyder. Not everything can be heaped upon him for everything, but there's enough there where he had some involvement, where you give someone like that a blank check, not knowing what's going to happen. There's 3 investigations that we know are out there. Mary Jo White, U.S. Attorney's Office, the grand jury, and here in Virginia, and also the Virginia Attorney General, which is still ongoing as of yesterday when I checked.
So AJ, I got the question that I have is, so why do you think now we are actually able to peel back the onion and see his business dealings, since for so long he's been Teflon Dan?
Yeah, it's a lot of it. People always look at the timing. I think that the first ESPN story that dropped last fall happened right before they played. They had right before one of their games. I don't know if it was a primetime game or I can't remember, but it was like literally right before a few hours, well, maybe a day at that point before. And it was like, that took people away from talking about the football team again. And obviously that was pretty damaging, that Dan has dirt on other owners and they're worried about that. But the timing is very interesting. Part of it, as I reported Monday, before all the other reports came, was like, the other owners I've talked to were just getting just I would say annoyed. I mean, they're just like, where is the sale going? We're 3+ months into it, and what's going on? And there wasn't much. And we didn't have. We had a couple of visits. We knew a few of the candidates. He's Bezos hasn't bid. We knew that. He's looking for $7 billion, which I reported a couple of days before the Super Bowl when I was in Phoenix. And it's like, he was holding out for more money, but at one point it's like, there's nothing. I'm not saying anybody's behind it. The timing's probably very coincidental, but it comes at a juncture where the combine's starting. We have a special meeting next week in Florida, and then you have the full owners meetings coming up in Phoenix, which I'll be at. I don't think you read into the timing. It's stories happen when they happen. I have somebody who has written stories at midnight or 1 a.m. You go with what. You would go with a story when you're comfortable and your editors are comfortable with it and you're sourcing solid. But I know the ESPN story, Davin has been working on that. This is I don't need to talk about other reporters, but he's working on that a long time. There's been whispers of that for a while. And in fact, it goes back to October. I mean, I think that's when the story dropped, the Dan Dirt story, whatever, October, November of last year. Mm-hmm. That's when we were like, hey, when we read that story, I was like, wow, the financial stuff isn't in there. And the financial stuff hasn't really been talked about really much. Congress kind of dropped it after the letter of the FTC. That was almost a year ago. That letter of the FTC that launched basically launched this cold federal probe as well. But it was, and launched the attorney generals in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. And Maryland settled. DC has 2 lawsuits. Virginia's still going. That was a big jumping off point. But we didn't see any of the financial stuff in the final findings from the House Oversight Committee that came out in December. We didn't see much of the financial stuff in there. That was kind of that at that time. I was like, well, we heard, when you're in this beat, you hear like what other people are working on. You don't know what they're working on. I don't want to steal other people's reporting or try to jump off and try to beat them for the hard work that they're doing and that ESPN and Dan Benada did. But it was interesting. I was like, it dropped Tuesday. I had the subpoena last Wednesday, a week ago. I had that subpoena. I broke that there was a subpoena. I didn't know what they were looking at exactly. Got a statement from the team. Got a statement. Got a no comment from the U.S. Attorney's Office as always. So we knew a little bit then that something was going on. A lot of this leads back. There's several things. A lot of this just goes back to what the co-owners getting annoyed at Snyder. That caused a lot of issues back then. That was settled. That was supposed to be settled a couple of years ago. But when you have 3 rich or very rich people who were basically were denied, they wanted Dan Snyder to sell the entire team. They get more money that way. Instead they took not $900 million or close to that for the 40%. Snyder had to take out a lot of loans, and we saw how much the debt load was in the latest ESPN story. We knew the debt will, we didn't know how much cash Snyder put into that, and it ended up looked like not much. So he has, carrying about $1 billion in debt. And there's been rumors here in Ashburn. I'm in Leesburg, but when I'm in Ashburn, next door, there's been you hear rumors of like, oh, they got to move stuff around. They're having trouble with this, trouble with that. Never. I've spent 2 years looking into some of this stuff, and it never points back to Snyder or that there's really issues. And that's a credit to the people they hired after they fired Bruce Allen and everybody else, including Jason Wright and Martin Mayhew. They do have a good job. They do a good job with kind of, I would say damage control, but everything's fine. Don't worry about it. But it could be on their end. I'm not, that could be the case, but there was all this stuff comes, and it just paints it in paints Snyder in a worse light. And we already know, even before the summer of 2020, when the Washington Post dropped those 2 stories that started all this, it wasn't rosy around here. The team was not successful. The team, they keep every single season. They tarp off more of FedEx. And every single season we see more. The fans that do show up, it did rebound in last season. The attendance did rebound a little bit, but half the fans are there for the other team, especially if you're going to play someone from the Eagles or the Cowboys or other NFC East teams. That you see, or even the Green Bay Packers. I mean, they had the homecoming game, and it was like all Green Bay Packers fans. So that that's the NFL owners. The other owners just realize it. They realize, and they don't always blame Snyder for not getting a stadium, but they do see, allegations of financial misconduct, which we broke. It's been almost about a year ago too. It was. So we broke the story that that ended up being part of this Dan Benada story, and I just did not. That was pretty big for a startup. So we did that, and we kept going on as best we could. We kept breaking stories. But I'm only one reporter, but I'm glad others are on it, so this stuff gets out there.
Yeah.
And you've been doing a great job. And once again, we're joined by AJ Perez from Front Office Sports. AJ, one of the other questions I have for you is, going through this bid process, Rally likes to say, he was what was it on eBay, Rally, you used to do at the last minute?
Oh, I used to hawk bids.
So he would wait until the last minute and just outbid people on eBay when the timer was going down to 0. And we know that Bezos has not put a bid in yet. That I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name, put the bid in for $5.5 billion.
Fertitta.
Fertitta put his bid in.
Yeah.
And there's stories out there that Snyder's not going to sell if it doesn't get to $7 billion, and that some people are thinking exactly it's not going to get there because knowing that how much a stadium is going to cost, knowing how much the facilities are going to cost. The NFLPA just came out with their report card maybe an hour ago, talking about how the Commanders are 32 out of 32 teams in regards to facilities and training rooms.
The training, the facilities in Ashburn are 30 years old at this point. Almost 30 years, or about 30 years old. Yeah. You're right. I mean, they put that dome in, I don't know how many years ago. After I moved here. The bubble after I moved here. But yeah, it's a team that's been stagnant for many in many ways. And all of it leads back to Snyder. I mean, he has to take ultimate control. It's almost 24 years as an owner. You have to take some, you have to take responsibility. He never wants to, and for anything, it's always somebody else's fault. And at some point, it's like you got to look inward, man. It's like I don't know. We saw his wife get booed. Now she's a co-CEO, Tanya Snyder, get booed during the game, and I had people texting me. I'm like, dude, I was like, that could change things. So many things could change things. I've been hearing this could change. This is going to change. This is going to change this, and he's still the owner. And finally, I think things are moving either towards a sale. Now it's a fire sale. I mean, now it's like you're like showing your house and you just crash your car into the front of it before when it goes in the market. You're not going to get as much money for it now. Now all this stuff comes out. If you would have let Bezos bid earlier in this process, instead of needing a bunch of people to vouch for Jeff Bezos and saying, Jeff Bezos doesn't write the stories that Liz Clark and Nikki and Mark write. I mean, that could have, so much things could have been done differently. The timing of the sale was always kind of, the subpoena hit somewhere around there. Don't have the timing exactly, but it was somewhere, from what I understand from one of my sources, was the subpoena came not too far before he announced the sale. Is there a cause and effect there? I have no idea. But there's at some point, there was that he and it could have been just, a couple of, like, why I had one source going back to when this all started in November, who was like, hey, just go through the process and just keep the team. That was like, and that was speculated by others, but this was a banker who I talk to fairly regularly. Actually there's two, there's a couple other sources as well that were like, yeah, because that was Robert Sarver that's what everybody thought Sarver was going to do with the Suns. Now he ended up selling. But so it was, that was always back in every story. It's like, almost after mention, like, oh, there's always this chance, And now that, I just don't, at this point, even though Goodell kind of got brought into this ESPN story and over the $55 million loan, and, there's other things hanging out there, I think the league's better off with him gone. And I think that's how the owners feel. And not all of them, I'm sure but we're getting close to 24 for removal. I can't speak for all. I can only speak for the ones I keep in touch with. It's not all 32. I guarantee that. So that's there's going to be some kind of, not to say settlement, but there's going to be some kind of there's going to be some kind of deal worked out, I'm sure, when it comes to not identification, but it's kind of like, hey, you're gonna go away. And Snyder can't sue. He can sue. If they take it away from him, he can sue. But and actually Brian Flores today was able to keep his case out of arbitration, and the NFL will probably appeal that. Like everybody else in the NFL, Dan Snyder is bound by NFL arbitration. When he bought the team in '99, he's bound by that, and arbitration is run by Roger Goodell. Or his designee. So he could sue, and then probably it'll be in the federal courts for a couple months before it gets compelled to arbitration, maybe longer. But it'll almost every single time it ends up there, because this is an NFL. This is an NFL matter. It's not. You're not suing. It's not anything to do with anything but beyond the NFL. It's the NFL. So how are you gonna keep out of the whole secret arbitration that these co-owners were put in? And then we see it. I've never seen arbitration documents that Dan Manata got. That's so awesome. Because I've covered, from Zeke Elliott to all these other cases in arbitration I've covered over these, going back to Star Caps with New Orleans Saints, like that was like 15 years ago. I've covered all this. I've never seen an arbitration. I covered Caps arbitration. Never, and I know his lawyers, and they don't tell me anything about what happened. The numbers are coming out of how much Cap settled for. Nope, I couldn't even get a gauge from the guy. And that's how secret the process usually is. The fact that those leak, and I said this, I guess I may have said it on Twitter last night, that's a bigger deal to the NFL or a lot of people within the NFL than the John Gruden emails leaking.
But at some point, AJ, you think that, come on, man, he's had enough. at some point you just let's sleep in dogs.
Do we? I mean, look at everything he's gone through. I know. I think all of us would feel, I'm like, yeah, I'm not wanted, but I'm going to get like $6 or $7 billion. That's kind of cool. I'll go somewhere where I am wanted.
Like
and
London.
That would be the normal reaction, right? Wouldn't it? But it's not.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's amazing. I'm not saying he lives in a bubble or anything. He must know how the fans feel, and he knows he's hires all. The one indication that Dan Snyder knows, how bad things are, just look at how much he's spending on lawyers. I mean, if he's really hard up for money, these lawyers aren't cheap, and he's got tons of them. And, that's adding up, whether, that's an expense that we don't really talk about, but he has a ton of lawyers who've done a lot of work, hours worth of work. I mean, they're probably even talking to when they talk to the media, they're probably going to be, they're on the clock. And even so that's a lot of lawyers that he's been, having either to fight a subpoena from Congress or, to deal with the co-owners. To do that arbitration, you need lawyers. It's every part of the way he's had many, many lawyers. And I'm working on something close to that. I can't give it away, but like kind of along those lines right now. But okay. Yeah, it's nuts that, that he's still fighting. And what you see why though. This is all he wanted to do. He grew up in Silver Spring. He loved the Redskins. He wanted the team. He's had the team for 24 years, not very successfully as an owner, but he's owned them. And he doesn't have the outside businesses that some other owners have. This is his piggy bank, as Dan Manhattan, which I've heard my sources say over the years. This is his piggy bank. This is his main source of income. And that's how he's taking loans out. Maybe shouldn't have. Maybe he's taking loans out to the league. Yet we are told he paid $49 million cash for his house a couple years ago down there in Alexandria. So you hear differing things from Snyder's side and then we see the reporting that kind of contradicts a lot of it.
Yeah. And I can't speak for other individuals, but at least in my eyes, they're innocent until they're proven guilty, just because all of the reporters that are doing their job, like you, like Dan, JP Finley, other guys out there, they are providing facts. And for me, Riley, we're not here about speculation. It's about the facts. And the fact that Dan was able to get those documents, that these were, in court documents and things are coming out from there, it's very hard to refute from the commander standpoint. And seeing some of the statements that have been coming out, I was concerned that after seeing a couple posts, if he doesn't get the $7 billion, he's not going to sell. But now after seeing the ESPN story and the alleged $55 or $50 million line of credits that was not supposed to have been approved by the board of directors, that to me is damning. If that actually holds legs. I mean, you came out with the fact of the subpoena, and then now seeing all the different pieces of that and just how petty that got with the 4.7 million or $4.5 million for putting the old Redskins logo on his airplane and so on and so forth.
That was the best part. That was my favorite part of the story. Maybe I'm weird. I cannot believe you're just putting $4.5 million for the logo on your airplane, on your private jet. Just a thing that you could have done with the money for charity. And I know he did. That's the one thing that I get crap whenever I say this. The Brownlee, one of the attorneys, like put one on TV and said, "Oh, AJ Perez, has had critical coverage," said because I tweeted out that I was calling around because I heard vendors were getting paid slow. This is all this money stuff I've been chasing. But I called around, and I guess I talked to a vendor for a transportation company who lost her husband, and Snyder stepped up and paid for her kid's college. So now I'm fair. I'm tweeting that. I got killed on Twitter for saying that. Then Brownlee goes on the air right afterwards and says, "Hey, AJ," I'm like, "Hey." But yeah, that's what I've been. So it's like we're all fair. We all but Dan does things that we don't know about, as far as charities and stuff. And he's he's actually pretty generous, worth a lot of things. But that whole $4.5 million for a logo on a plane, when that money could have been used in so many better ways, upgrading the weight room, doing something else with that money for the team, that's what that's pretty, especially outside. He's already known for signing past their prime free agents, at least early in his ownership.
Beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, concur that he does do a lot of charity stuff behind the scenes. I organized Chief Z's funeral, Zima Williams. Z was a good friend of mine, and I organized that through the team. And they at first did not want people to know that they were paying for it.
Yeah, they don't. They like keeping all that quiet, and that's awful. Because like he would not be saved by if everybody knew what he did. Charity, like just being seeming more human by doing those things. It wouldn't save him, but it would help. Not doing media interviews. I don't think I had a story out. I don't think he's done a media interview since 2014. I mean, that's that, and he owned 2 stations, or one of the stations here. So I think that was the last time he was on when he owned that. I think he was talking. I don't remember who he was talking to, Cooley or something back then. So yeah, there's a lot of things that could have helped Snyder before all this happened. That goodwill, being more accessible. Him suing that fan, I would have sued the fan too. But there's other things that he could have handled that better probably. But I don't. She was not without blame for that. But there's other. So but when the narrative starts and you're losing, that's you got to do something. The narrative was never. There's always a honeymoon period with an owner, and I was still in California in college when he bought the team. But there's a lot of things he could have done over the years, including being more forthcoming to fans and being more accessible to the media. Not that we have to bow to us, but even just showing up to events and being around fans. There's so many things he could have done better, and he's probably gonna look back and look at all the mistakes he's made, and that's got to be one of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna bring it on home, AJ, and our listeners as well as the viewers want to know, in your professional opinion, when is this going to happen and be done finally?
Oh, I said Thursday after the BME press conference. I was like, yeah, I might know in 3 or 4 weeks where this is headed, or we may actually have a bid in, an application in. I have no idea at this point, man. If he stays and fights, and it's gonna get so ugly. We're gonna be doing this for at least for a few more weeks, and then you got to look. It's gonna take almost 2 months before the application goes in, before there's gonna be a vote for a new owner. So yeah, we got to factor that in. It could be less than 2 months, could be 5-6 weeks, but at least even if it comes out today that we have an owner, or a prospective owner, and the bid's been accepted, it's going to take a while, and that's going to be a while, even 4, 5, 6 weeks at that.
Well, once again, we're joined by AJ Perez from Front Office Sports, and AJ, thank you for being so gracious with your time. One last one for me. I've thought in my heart that he would not sell to Bezos just because of everything happening. And even if Bezos comes in with the higher bid and offers more money, and that's why I think Bezos hired the firm to make sure he's not bidding against himself. But I feel that Snyder would take less money just to not sell to Bezos.
Yeah.
Would the NFL allow that, or do they have the power to force him to take the highest bid?
Yeah, they can't force him to take a higher bid, but they can deny. They can deny the whoever he picks that paid less. Now there's a sliding scale. I think if someone bids $200 million less, even $300 million less, $300 million less, it's probably at this point, with all this going on, probably more likely that they're going to vote to approve. There'll be a discussion about it for sure, because you don't want it, especially if the other person you're leaving out is Bezos, and the owners want Bezos, and there's no guarantee when the next NFL team will come on the market. But there's if it's like 500 million, if someone besides Bezos or somebody else bids $500 million more, and then doesn't want to sell to them, that could be an issue. But then you're stuck back here. You start the process all over again. Look how long this took. We're like 120 days or whatever it is now long, and we still don't really have anything really solid, concrete when it comes to the leader in the clubhouse at this point. You're gonna start this process all over again while the federal investigation goes on. Mary Jo White's report's gonna drop before that. That's gonna come out in the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't say that. I can't put a time on it, but I would be guessing it'll be around the owners' meetings, if not before. And so that's less than a month away. So there's no indications that it's gonna come out like tomorrow, but you never know. She's on her own timeline, I was told. So there's so much hanging out there, and there's this federal investigation could take a long time. Unless they can wrap it up, these federal investigations can take a couple of years. and if it's pretty straightforward and there's, they can find fraud or can't find fraud, they'll say there's nothing there and just move on, maybe. But that's going to be hanging over them during that process. So you're going to be back to square one with federal investigation still going on. We'll have whatever Mary Jo White reported, and that's going to be more, the owners told me just, not to count on that. You can't count on it in an investigation to prompt anything, because you don't know what's going to be in it. We don't know, so I just don't think going back to square one at this point, unless it's like a big difference, or, unless he's really in a bad money spot and the owners, if they're petty, know he's having problems making his loan payments, they could, that's the other part of it. It's like, if going back to square one, the NFL denies him, he's going to be hard up. And I have no reason to doubt ESPN's reporting, but he's going to be hard up financially. We're going to be talking about the NFLPA is going to get involved if anything even comes close to missing payments to players. What talent, you just hired Eric Bieniemy. You got to pay him. You got to pay all the coaches. You got to pay all the staff. You got to pay all the vendors. And how will game day concessions to game day, the other game day experiences take a hit because, Snyder's, actually financially on, the financial hardship basically. So so it's like there's so many things that you can go down any path at this point, and it could be rosy or it can be just bleak, and it could be a little of both. We'll find out.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of gray area, and from a fan perspective, I'm more concerned about free agency and what's going to happen. Are they going to truly be on a budget, or are we going to go after players knowing that Snyder has to put that signing bonus in escrow? And how is that going to affect potentially locking up Deron Payne after giving him the franchise tag and negotiations? And I'm in the belief that it's going to limit our ability to bring players here because, I recently refinanced my home. Well, I needed to buy a new car at the same time. And, I didn't have the money to do that. And the bank's telling you not to do that. And when you're applying for a mortgage and things like that, they're saying, well, you can't make any big purchases. Well, does he really want to put money down for a player that he's not even going to be the owner of several years down?
I
think there were certain assurances made from what I heard that, that this whole process will not impact, that's what I was hearing, but I was actually surprised they fired Scott Turner. And, that was, I knew there would be much more movement with coaches beyond that. But yeah, the new league year is what we got 15 days out. So, that's when we're going to find out, what he can do, what he can't do in free agency, if there's any impact at all. With Snyder denying all this, maybe he'll overspend. And so you never know. It's so up in the air right now. It's even hard to predict what's going to happen tomorrow with all of this. And I think after the combine and the next week, you got the kind of the committee meetings down in Florida before the owners meetings. It's, more stuff's going to be leaking out, and we'll have a better idea where it's going.
It really is all up in the air. But AJ, thank you for taking the time to join Rally and I on the DMV Mess Hall.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to promote while you're on with us?
Yeah, go to frontofficesports.com, sign up for our newsletter. We get twice a day, once a day on it, and once daily, or once on Saturday, once on Sunday. Free newsletter. You get all the best sports business culture and everything else that we offer. And go to our website, frontofficesports.com. Follow me at DYAJ Perez on Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you, AJ. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah.